You think you're free. But look closer. Every choice you make, what you watch, what you eat, even what you dream about, has already been decided for you by a system that wants you weak. That voice in your head telling you you're not enough, that wasn't born with you. It was planted, installed, a script written to keep you small. And you felt it, haven't you? That heavy tiredness after school or work, as if your energy was stolen. That moment you stayed silent when you wanted to speak. That late night when Netflix pulled you in again and your own goals faded into the background. That wasn't laziness. That wasn't a weakness. That was conditioning. From childhood cartoons loaded with ads to schools that punished creativity but rewarded memorization, to social media that trains you to crave outrage and distraction. It's all been shaping you for years. You didn't choose this. You were programmed into it. Nietzsche saw this coming long before screens and algorithms. He warned that most people would trade their strength for comfort and call it happiness. But here's the cost. If you don't wake up, you'll keep living on autopilot, chasing distractions, feeling weaker with time. Opportunities will slip past you without you even noticing. Friendships, chances, whole seasons of your life. And then comes the deeper tragedy. One day, you'll look back and realize it wasn't just missed chances. It was your entire life. It was never truly yours. Every decision, every dream, every ounce of your potential quietly belonged to the system that trained you. Think about it. How many opportunities have you already missed because you doubted yourself? How many times have you stayed silent when you wanted to speak? That wasn't a weakness. That was programming. Nietzsche called it the tragedy of the last man. The one who trades effort for comfort, struggle for sedation, and then dares to call that happiness. That is the cage most live and die inside. But once you see the strings, you're no longer just a puppet. You can resist. You can reject the scripts that keep you soft. You can choose your own. Most people won't. Most people will stay programmed, docile, comfortable, blind. But a few will rise. A few will choose discomfort over sedation, struggle over safety, strength over weakness. And the only question left is this: which one are you? Most people will never ask that question. They'll never stop to wonder which one they are. They'll nod along, scroll on, and sink back into the rhythm of their cage. But you're still here, which means, at least for now, you're willing to look closer. And when you look, the first thing you'll notice is this: the chains were never meant to be obvious. If they were iron shackles around your wrists, you'd fight them. But they're softer than that, invisible, woven into the routines of your daily life. Chains that whisper instead of clank. Take school. You thought it was only about learning. But what did it really teach you? Not how to think, but how to obey. How to memorize instead of question. How to silence your own creativity so you could pass a test someone else wrote. Every time you raised your hand and were told to wait. Every time you made a mistake and were shamed instead of guided. You weren't just learning math or grammar. You were learning fear. Fear of failure. Fear of standing out. Fear of defying authority. That fear still follows you, even now. And then came work, a job that promised security but trained you in dependence. Hours traded for survival, dreams shelved for paychecks. You were told this was freedom, the dignity of hard work. But why does it feel more like a leash? Why do you find yourself waiting for weekends as if they were tiny escapes from a prison sentence. Then there's the media. The endless glow of screens, designed not to inform you, but to addict you, to give you small bursts of outrage, lust, or laughter, just enough to keep you coming back. You thought you were choosing what to watch. But the truth? The algorithm chose you. It studied you like a lab rat, discovered your cravings, and fed them back to you until you forgot what you really hungered for. And look at comfort. Comfort was sold to you as happiness. Fast food, same-day delivery, endless scrolling, binge watching. You thought these were little rewards, but comfort has a cost. It dulls the edge of your spirit. It turns sharp instincts into soft habits. It teaches you to avoid pain, to reject struggle, to despise the very things that could make you strong. These are the invisible chains. Chains that don't hold your body down. They hold your mind. Chains that don't force you to obey. They make you want to obey. And here's the cruelest trick of all. They make you believe it was your choice. You chose the job. You chose the binge. You chose to stay silent when you wanted to speak. That's what the system whispers. But ask yourself, if you were truly free, why do all your choices look exactly the same as everyone else's? Nietzsche warned of this. He saw the rise of the last man, the kind of person who doesn't even notice the cage because he's too busy decorating it. The man who avoids struggle, avoids suffering, avoids greatness, and calls that avoidance happiness. Look around, and you'll see him everywhere. And if you're not careful, you'll see him in the mirror. But here's where things shift. Because now, you've seen the chains. You've named them. And once seen, they can't stay invisible. That's the first crack in their power. The real question is not whether you're chained. We all are. The real question is whether you'll stay that way. The chains are real, but chains alone wouldn't be enough to hold you. No, to keep you weak, there had to be a story so persuasive, you wouldn't even want to fight back. And here's that story. Comfort is happiness. You've heard it your whole life. Work hard so you can finally relax. Buy this and you'll feel complete. Avoid pain, avoid effort, avoid risk, because those are the enemies of peace. Stay safe, stay quiet, stay small. It sounds so harmless. Who doesn't want comfort? Who doesn't want peace? But here's the catch. This story is a lie. A beautifully wrapped poison, because comfort doesn't make you happy. It makes you weaker. And weakness, deep down, never feels like peace. Think about it. That moment when you sink into the couch for the third episode, even though you promised yourself you'd stop at one. The greasy meal that feels good for 10 minutes, but leaves you empty an hour later. The endless scrolling that numbs your boredom, but robs you of your time. Comfort whispers happiness, but delivers only sedation. And sedation is not living. It's drifting. It's sleepwalking through days, months, years, until you look back and wonder where your life went. This is the great trade you were tricked into making. Struggle for sedation, growth for distraction, strength for softness. Nietzsche warned that modern man would fall for this. He called it the tragedy of the last man. A man with no higher purpose, no fire in his soul, no hunger for greatness. A man who spends his days chasing little comforts, warmth, entertainment, pleasure, and then calls that dullness happiness. He never suffers, but he never truly lives. And here's the dangerous part. The last man isn't miserable. He's content, sedated, smiling faintly in his cage. And that makes the lie harder to resist. Because Because if everyone around you is smiling the same shallow smile, you begin to think maybe that's all life has to offer. But hasn't a part of you always suspected more? Haven't you felt it? That ache that comfort never cures? That quiet restlessness when life feels too easy, too predictable, too small? That is your soul remembering what it was built for. You were not built for sedation. You were built for struggle. You were built for the weight of responsibility, for the fire of creation, for the danger of freedom. The system doesn't want you to believe that. It wants you soft. It wants you obedient. It wants you to trade your power for pleasure and your freedom for comfort. Because a weak population is easy to control. And here's the proof. Look around. How many people do you know who dream of changing their lives, but never do? How many talk of passion, but never act? How many promise themselves someday, but someday never comes? That isn't laziness. That isn't lack of will. That is the lie at work. But you've begun to see it now. The chains, the story, the way it all fits together. And that's dangerous. Dangerous to the system. Because once you know comfort is not happiness, you're harder to control. You start asking different questions. If comfort isn't happiness, what is? If sedation isn't peace, then what is strength? And that brings us to the heart of it, the cost of staying asleep. If sedation isn't peace, then what is strength? To answer that, you first have to see the cost. Because every lie you keep believing, every chain you refuse to break, comes with a price. And that price is your life. Staying asleep feels harmless at first. It feels easy. It feels normal. You wake up tired. You go to work. You scroll. You eat. You sleep. You repeat. Days blur into weeks. Weeks blur into years. And all the while, you tell yourself you'll change tomorrow. But tomorrow never comes. The first cost is time. Not the hours you waste, but the life those hours could have become. That book you never wrote. That trip you never took. That person you never became. The tragedy of staying asleep is not what you do. It's what you never do. Opportunities pass quietly. Friendships dissolve. Dreams wither. And you never even notice until they're gone. The second cost is strength. Not just muscle, not just endurance, but inner strength. The kind of strength that comes only from struggle, from facing pain instead of avoiding it. When you avoid discomfort, you avoid growth. You remain soft, fragile, dependent. And the longer you stay asleep, the weaker you become. Not because life is cruel, but because comfort drained you one easy choice at a time. The third cost is love. Because weakness poisons relationships. When you stay programmed, you settle. You settle for shallow connections, for convenience, for people who keep you comfortable instead of people who challenge you to rise. You silence your truth to avoid conflict. You shrink yourself so others won't feel threatened. And slowly, love becomes another form of sedation, pleasant but hollow. The fourth cost is freedom. You tell yourself you're free because you can choose what to watch, what to eat, what to buy. But freedom is not choice. Freedom is power. And the weak have no power. They follow the crowd. They obey the algorithm. They depend on the system to survive. And dependence is not freedom. It's servitude. A gilded cage is still a cage. And then comes the final cost, regret. The one you can't pay in advance. The one that only arrives when it's too late. One day, you'll look back and realize you didn't just waste time. You wasted yourself. The potential that was once alive in you has gone quiet. The dreams that once burned in you have turned to ashes. you'll realize the chains were never unbreakable. You simply refused to break them. And there is no pain sharper than that. Nietzsche saw this tragedy long before you were born. He wrote of people who would cling to comfort so tightly they would never live at all. People who would avoid suffering at any cost, and in doing so, avoid greatness. He called them the last men. Small souls who trade everything for safety, who laugh at the very idea of risk, who believe comfort is enough. And he warned, the world would be full of them. Look around. Was he wrong? Or do you see it everywhere? The half-awake eyes, the forced smiles, the quiet desperation. Entire lives sacrificed at the altar of comfort. But here's the most dangerous cost of staying asleep. You forget you're asleep. You forget there was ever more to want. You stop hungering for greatness. You stop yearning for truth. You stop believing in the fire that once burned in you. And without that fire, you don't just lose your strength, you lose yourself. That's why staying asleep is not harmless. It's fatal. Not to your body, perhaps, but to your soul. And now you see it. The chains, the lie, the cost. But seeing is only the beginning. Because knowing you're asleep does not wake you. So the question becomes, what does? That's where the awakening begins. It isn't comfort. Comfort will rock you back to sleep. It isn't distraction. Distraction is the lullaby of the cage. Awakening only comes through shock, through pain, through the jolt of realizing the world you thought was yours has been quietly shaping you all along. And here's the truth. You've already felt that jolt, that restless ache when the weekend ends and you wonder if this is all there is. That quiet panic at night when you sense time slipping through your fingers faster than you can hold it. That bitter taste of regret when you realize a choice was made for you, not by you. Those are not random feelings. Those are alarms. Alarms you've been trained to silence. Every time you scrolled to numb them, every time you joked them away, every time you told yourself, it's fine, this is just how life is. That was the programming at work. Because the system cannot afford your awakening. It cannot afford your strength. It needs you compliant. It needs you small. But the moment you stop silencing those alarms, the awakening begins. It starts with noticing the strings, the patterns, the way your habits aren't really yours, the way your free choices echo the same patterns as millions of others, the way the system rewards obedience and punishes defiance. Once you notice, you can't unsee it. The strings become visible, the cage undeniable. And once you see the strings, you stop blaming yourself. That's the first crack of freedom. Because all those years you called yourself lazy, weak, unmotivated, none of that was true. Laziness was not your nature. Weakness was not your essence. They were engineered, designed, installed. And when you realize that, you begin to forgive yourself. That forgiveness is dangerous because it ends the cycle of shame. And without shame weighing you down, you begin to rise. Nietzsche understood this too. He warned that the great danger wasn't suffering, it was sedation. He said the one who suffers and chooses to grow through it will become stronger, freer, more alive. But the one who avoids suffering will wither. The tragedy of the last man is not pain, it's numbness. Your awakening begins when you reject numbness, when you stop mistaking sedation for peace, when you let yourself feel again, even if what you feel is uncomfortable. Pain is not your enemy. Pain is proof you are alive. Discomfort is not weakness. Discomfort is the doorway to strength. And here's where the awakening deepens. Once you see the strings, you realize you can cut them. Not all at once, not easily, but thread by thread, choice by choice. You cut them when you speak the truth you were afraid to say. You cut them when you endure the discomfort you used to avoid. You cut them when you turn off the screen and sit with yourself in silence. You cut them when you stop living as if you have endless tomorrows and begin acting like your time is finite. Each cut is small. Each cut is painful. But each cut is freedom. And with every cut, you grow stronger. Not because the world suddenly changes, but because you do. Because instead of drifting along, you begin to command yourself. To choose struggle when you could choose sedation. To choose growth when you could choose comfort. To choose the fire instead of the fog. That is awakening. The moment you stop being the puppet and start being the master of your own strings. Most won't get here. Most will hear the alarms and hit snooze. They'll laugh at the idea of freedom, call it overthinking, and sink back into their sedation. They'll trade their fire for comfort, their strength for safety, their lives for nothing. But a few, and maybe you, will refuse. A few will listen to the alarms, see the strings, and start cutting. A few will accept that awakening is not a one-time event, but a daily choice, a discipline, a war against the parts of you that want to fall back asleep. And when you choose that war, you'll discover something the system doesn't want you to know. The chains were never unbreakable. They were only invisible. And invisible chains lose their power the moment you decide to see them. That's where awakening begins. And now the question becomes, what happens if you not only awaken, but rise? Awakening shows you the strings. Rising is when you cut them. Awakening opens your eyes. Rising is when you step out of the cage. Awakening gives you truth. Rising demands you live it. And here's the truth most people will run from. Rising is painful. It has to be. Because every chain you cut is tied to a part of you that has grown comfortable in captivity. Every step you take toward freedom means leaving behind the soft illusions that once cradled you. Rising feels like tearing away your skin, but it is only the false skin the world stitched onto you. You rise the first time you say no. No to the endless scrolling. No to the food that numbs you. No to the silence that keeps you small. You rise when you stop apologizing for your hunger. You rise when you stop calling your strength a burden. You rise when you let yourself feel the full weight of life. Its chaos, its struggle, its raw demand. And you refuse to turn away. But let's be clear. Rising does not look glamorous. At first, it looks like struggle. It looks like doubt. It looks like trembling hands and restless nights and the sting of loneliness. Because rising means leaving behind the herd, the crowd that would rather you stay weak so your strength never confronts their sedation. You'll feel the pull to go back to comfort, back to numbness, back to the soft walls of the cage. And most people do. Most people awaken just enough to glimpse freedom. And then, terrified, they retreat. But if you endure, if you hold the discomfort instead of running from it, something begins to change. Slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. You begin to trust yourself again. You begin to respect yourself. You begin to sense that strength isn't found in avoiding struggle. It is forged within it. And every time you choose struggle over sedation, that strength multiplies. Nietzsche knew this. He spoke of the Übermensch, not a superhuman with powers, but the human who chooses to rise above programming. The human who embraces life's chaos, who doesn't beg for comfort but wrestles meaning out of suffering. The human who dares to create values rather than inherit them. That is the one who rises. And here's the secret. Rising is not a single moment. It is not a sudden transformation. Rising is a practice, a discipline, 1,000 small choices stacked one on top of another, until one day you look in the mirror and realize you are no longer the same. The system wants you weak, but every act of resistance builds strength. Every time you choose the harder path, you chip away at the old self. Every time you endure discomfort, you discover the fire that has always been inside you. And when that fire grows, you begin to see what the sedated never will. You see that life is not supposed to be easy. Life is supposed to be alive. You see that peace doesn't come from avoiding storms, but from standing tall in the middle of them. You see that freedom is not given. It is taken, seized, defended. This is what rising gives you. Not a life free from pain, but a life filled with power. Not the shallow contentment of sedation, but the deep fulfillment of becoming. Not comfort, but courage. And once you taste that, you'll never mistake sedation for peace again. You'll never trade your fire for the fog. You'll never settle for the lie. But here's the warning. The world around you will try to drag you back down. The moment you rise, you threaten the system. You disrupt the order. You remind others of the fire they've buried, and they won't always thank you for it. Some will mock you. Some will resent you. Some will call you selfish, reckless, even dangerous. But remember this. Every great act of freedom has always been called dangerous by those who live chained. So the choice is before you now. Stay safe. Stay sedated. Stay weak. Or rise. Rise into your fire. Rise into your strength. Rise into a life that is wholly yours. Because the system may have programmed you to stay weak, but only you decide if that programming becomes your destiny. And this brings us to the final truth. What kind of life will you choose to create once you rise? You step into a life most people will never taste. Not because it is hidden, but because it is hard. Because freedom is costly. Because strength demands sacrifice. But once you rise, you see the cost was nothing compared to what you gain. You gain yourself. Not the version shaped by schools and screens, but the self that was buried under years of programming. You rediscover the hunger, the fire, the vision that was always yours. And for the first time, your choices are truly your own. You gain meaning. Not the shallow satisfaction of distraction, but the deep fulfillment that only comes when you wrestle with life instead of hiding from it. Struggle no longer feels like punishment. It feels like proof. Pain no longer feels like weakness. It feels like the weight that forges strength, and you gain freedom. Not freedom as comfort, but freedom as power. The power to create, to shape, to stand tall in a world that would rather see you kneel. The power to live by your own values, even when the herd calls you mad. This is the life Nietzsche pointed toward. Not the easy life of the last man, but the blazing life of one who dares to rise above. Most will never choose it, but you can. And if you do, your life will no longer be programmed. It will be authored by you. So the question returns, as it always does. Will you stay weak? Or will you rise, cut the strings, and live a life that is truly yours?